Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay. So I can start, right?
Yes, you can start now.
Okay, good morning, everyone. As the introduction by Ms. Su, I think everyone know my role in ISN, but not everyone here working with Catapault system. My experience working with Catapault system mostly indoor. So the set will be a little bit different compared to the GPS system, as we use this accelerometer. But if we use this GPS system, the outdoor model, it includes the satellite data gathering and also the accelerometer. So 2 in 1 at the same time. While if we are working indoor, we only use the accelerometer. And during this presentation or the sharing, right, the limitation that I'm facing when I'm trying to interpret the data was the time, because I can see a few substitute and also the 11, and the timing for the substitute is very similar, which means there's no tagging going on, or maybe in the raw data, they only show you the total time. But the upcoming slides that I'm going to show you is actually I'm doing it manually because I got no access to the Catapault system that Penang FC is using. And after paying 10,000 to 20,000 per year using that system is supposed to do what I'm going to show you later. We simplify because this thing takes with the Catapault generated default data or template, we only need 2 to 3 hours to get the analysis and reporting done. While if the SNC or performance analyst give you the raw data and you want to finalize the thing to show the coach clearly, you really need a few days, which is not making sense. That's why we are purchasing it about 20,000 per year, subscribe to this Catapault cloud system. So the key limitation is I only got total match duration for all players and no specific time played. With that, I can only report volume. But inside the data, there are some breakdown, which is the high speed distance, high metabolic load distance, jogging, standing, or whatever it is, which is the breakdown of the activity. And key limitation too will be that's why I say I don't have the time taken for each quarter or each player that they play on the field. I cannot generate the work rate per minute. If I take the 2 hours match, and if we include the warm-up and the time that they're sitting on the bench, and they use the total distance divided by the time, which is not fair because the graph will shift down to a lower intensity. So in order to avoid this misleading information, this presentation won't include intensity data. Okay.
Wait, Chris, you mean that to include the real total play time, have to manually do something, or
if there is some exchange of player, the PA should aware that they have to stop that player, not letting the time keep running.
Okay. So there is a button that on and off lah for certain player. I mean the controller they able to do that, right?
Yes. Even if you use the iPad, you can simply click stop, because there's a player, there's a stop pause button over there.
Okay.
That's why when they substitute in, okay, this player start, and out, this player stop. I'm not sure whether they are using iPad or using laptop. But both of these devices can do the same thing.
On the spot, right?
On the spot.
Yeah, using iPad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he does so lah. I think he just generally trim the time, like I told you, like 5 minutes before and after the match.
That's why if you want to use this data fully, then they need a specific person to stop the system. If not, if you realize most of the data you get is like 1 hour plus 2 hours, which underutilize the system.
So actually it means that a lot of people, they don't know how to use it. Right?
No, they use it, but means they need to try to multitask. Because I worry that the PA, while they record, they are doing the live tagging also, so they basically can't multitask. Yeah, like what happens to hockey is the SNC, the strength and conditioning coach, is the one who to control the GPS system. Video recording, they will do live tagging.
But strength and conditioning coach, they will also do the warm-up for the upcoming reserve players, right? So he will be in another end, maybe, to train or maybe to warm up some of the players. So maybe he is not aware and always on the bench.
That's why they have to coordinate this thing, because when the match starts, when the athletes come out, they just stop that, just click a button, stop, and then when they are substitute that they want to go in, they just start the athlete.
So means that if let's say they refer to the total match duration is actually invalid. You cannot see anything at all.
We can't see the intensity clearly. Yeah.
Okay.
Can see the intensity. And before I start with the terminology, I have to clear up this thing. The player load that you see in the Catapault system is the quantities that the athletes run, which include forward acceleration, deceleration, and the change of direction, and also the distance. So all these algorithms combined, they will quantify this as a player load. And the second parameter that you will see will be the high metabolic load distance, which is include the high speed at above 19.8 kilometers per hour, and accelerated deceleration between 2 meters per square second for 1 second. So you have to follow this before I go into the data presentation. This is very important because some of the player might run 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers, 15 kilometers, but it's actually it's not necessary they are doing work. Some of them might just jog around, slow jog for 2 hours, slow jog for 90 minutes. Okay, that's why we have to break it down into this. I actually try to do this, but because I say if the intensity is not there, I can't complete this thing, because this is the day by day or match by match report. So immediately after the competition ends, the next day, before the team meeting, we will present this to the coaches, whether they are agree to this player running at this volume or anyone in the same position running less or working less compared to the rest of the players. That's why we break it down into back, mid, forward. So the interesting thing is, it might be tactical. That's why you have to communicate with coach whether this match, Liga Super 1, they won or lose. If they lose, what are the things they want to improve based on this thing? Okay. And I realized in Super League 5, I didn't find any forward in the match. Mostly defense.
Yeah, I think because that one is versus JDT, so they are trying to play more defense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all this data you can once the report from Catapault is done, you can transfer it to this template, so that where you can see compare among positions to be fair.
Chris, may I know that what do you mean PL HMLD?
Like this is from the first introduction here, player load, and high metabolic load distance, which include the 19.8 kilometer per hour high speed,
okay.
and then and also the acceleration, deceleration, and change of direction.
Acceleration and deceleration is under HMLD. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so all this you can actually once you completed the summary, like what I did, you can actually put this data into the field to visualize for coaches. This is to help the coaches to understand. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay, so here comes the real thing. I have break down the loading by position. I break down the loading by position. So each of this page represent each position: fullback, center back, center mid, forward. I'm not going to report goalkeeper because because goalkeeper got nothing to compare. This just his job. Okay. If you look at this, why am I drawing these two lines? Is because every match we got the average load, player load for each position. So in most of the literature, every team play differently. Agree? So they can't create a norm saying this value is high, this value is low, this value is medium. But if we look at this fullback graph, who did the least work?
Is it Adib?
Yeah, I think Adib.
Right? Okay. If I draw this, from here, I have quantified that above the mean plus standard deviation, the player load is high. standard mean and standard deviation is medium, and below that will be low. From here, we can clearly see that only Ahmad Irfan at the first match is over the mean plus standard deviation. So only the first match is high. Okay, and I can see the overall fullback. I didn't see any high loading, so we will skip that. How about this center back? Everyone is in the medium, right?
Except Ahmad.
Except Ahmad.
Location.
But they are still in the middle line. Mean plus standard deviation and mean minus standard deviation. So they are still considered medium. So our center midfielder, Amirul Hisham, is working in 3 leagues above the mean plus deviation load. So you have to take a look at his condition, whether he is losing weight or injury, and whether the loading is the same during training. If these conditions happening during training and happening during the match most of the time, which means Amirul Hisham and Izzat, these two persons, is doing a lot of hard work. We have to take a look at their nutritional refueling, and also the recovery, and also whether they accumulate injuries or fatigue or not. So we have to focus, put higher priority to these two persons.
Sorry, Chris. You know, there's bar below the bar at the bottom above the name, right? 2, 3, 4, 7. What does the number shows? Yeah.
It's the league.
Which game is it? Second game, third game, fourth game. Okay. All right, Shafiq, you have question. Just unmute yourself, lah. Raise your hand.
No, I also wanted to ask your question. And the colors, what?
I got it for one.
I want to ask what the colors mean.
The color means that. Okay. I need to close this. Okay, if we look at this, each color is the match mean for LS7 is green, LS5 is yellow, LS4 is peach color, is orange color, LS3 is red, LS1 is blue.
Chris,
Yes.
how you get the mean for the player load there?
The
mean.
Actually, it's the accumulation of the 7 matches for first 11.
Oh. But the play load is actually with the volume, with the intensity, with the time play, right?
Everything. Hang on. Is the distance cover? Is the distance cover? Is the acceleration? Is the deceleration? And the change of direction? And high-speed metabolic load? All these algorithms combined. It's a volume thing, not intensity.
Oh, okay. But usually when we look at the team sport data, we have to look at this PL.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So it's actually also a raw data that we can see directly from the Catapault, or we
Yes.
still need to do calculation.
No need. It's in the Catapault.
Okay.
And Catapault always don't want to share their exact equation to us
Oh, really? Yeah.
because they got they got their own equation.
So if let's say we inform the analysis to to pause or maybe to be activate when to show the total players actual time so that you can see the intensity data, right? Are we still referring to the PL?
PL is another is accumulative load that we can see longitudinally without time. What I want is the time is the reason why I need the time is when we want to give the feedback to coach post match, we want to know their intensity.
Oh, okay. So
This
longitudinally we see the PL,
yes.
but want to see who are the one who do good job for the specific the match. We will want to see the intensity.
Correct. The intensity is very important for the SNC. Yeah, because if they can complete at this workload at the expected at the coach expectation, which means the SNC objective achieved. But if the athletes can only work at this intensity at this certain time only, which means there are room for improvement. Yeah. So for example, why can very low player load compared to his teammate? Is there something that SNC have to work on this? That's a question to SNC lah. Is it because he's not fit or what?
Okay.
Yeah, as a central midfielder, because the mean and steady deviation in this position is actually quite high, and this guy Chia Rohan and yeah, only this guy. Why he's like playing below the mean?
Will it be affected by his real play time on the field?
This is the first 11. Oh, sorry. This is the sub. Yeah, sorry. This is the sub. This is sub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that case, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is like the example that I'm asking. When if this thing happened to the first 11, is there anything that the SNC can work on to improve?
So PL is regardless of the time, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But if he's sitting there, and the time is still going, the data won't show very significant. It's just that the load between 90 and 97 will be there because it's sitting with the Catapault system on. When he walked there to get some water and come back to his seat, so there are some load going on because it's still covered.
Okay.
So next will be the forward. Yeah, I think this is the Penang FC style because only 3 forward and the forward is not focusing on most of the match, only 2 and 4 for Bruno's and Kipra 137. Then Bruno is working above the mean. Also, this guy Kipre 137. Yeah, they are working above the mean. So as a forward, which they actually the player load here is considered moderate compared to the other position, but for forward, because if we compare in this position, is high. for these two guys.
You
So
mean
above,
their mean should be 400 to 600, right?
their mean should be around 600. Their mean, sorry.
Their mean.
Their mean for Bruno's match 2 will be around 400 to 600.
I'm still thinking how you draw these two lines. Are you getting the mean, or average data for all the forward athletes?
Average data for all the forward.
Okay, so that your previous one, like midfield, you will get the average data for all the
For
games,
midfield.
but the midfielder, okay.
Yeah.
Even though the substitute as well.
I remove the substitute.
So you just only take first 7,
First
11.
11.
But the thing is that I want to ask one thing. The norms here, is it showing their level at Super League?
We don't have other team to compare, so I can't say this data is low or high for in Super League.
Oh, okay. We don't have. Do we have? Do you think it's possible for us to get some literature to see, or maybe very difficult?
Provided got Malaysian published Super League data.
So means that even though we see that like Bruno Kipre work very high, but it's still compare among them only, right?
Correct. Correct. Correct.
Okay.
That's why this is very specific to Penang FC.
Okay.
So this is the midfielder. If you look at this, even though the previous position doesn't show much of the high load, but when we look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, Danilo, back-to-back match at this level, and OJ at this level, and also Dylan, they are working close to the mid and high. So in this situation, we really have to look at their condition. They might experience some weight loss, and they might experience some injury if we monitor this longitudinally. That's why Catapault, right? We don't look only during match. We look also at training and how the match is considered 100%. The training should be a few percentage from the 100%. Okay. For nutrition, people will usually look at the player load, energy expenditure, high metabolic load running. Because those who are can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Those who are working on very high metabolic load distance, they were experiencing a loss of glycogen depletion. Compared to goalkeeper, so this has to be very individualized. Even though the player load is 300 plus 300, let's say, forward 354, but the high metabolic load is 600 meters. Are we going to give the same same nutritional intervention? Yeah, that's a question that you have to ask. Because high metabolic load distance uses a lot of glycogen compared to those who cover, I need to find an example, who cover distance over almost 10K, but the high-speed running is very low. Yeah, I have to look at some example.
Chris.
Yes.
Now you show the HMLD, right? It's either high-speed running 19.8 kilometer per hour.
Yep.
Or above 5.5 minutes per second.
Correct.
But you know the reference just now and also the reference here. Sorry, the data that you show here. Is it different unit?
Oh, it's different unit. This is in meter. So how, for example, if they are running, because this is start and stop, change of direction, right? So when they go 19.8 kilometer per hour for 10 seconds, how many distance this guy covered? And then throughout the match, how many of this block, high speed accumulated?
Okay.
Yes, for example, yeah, let's say everyone run a long distance before, 10 kilometer, right? Okay. Sometimes when you see the guy in front, you can bully. You try to catch up faster. Sometimes you sprint over to take over this guy. So this is the example of your high metabolic low distance. And then when you didn't see this guy already, and you slow down, you go back to jogging. Yeah. So that distance that you cover actually, let's say 100 meters only, and then you jog back. So no more high speed running, high metabolic load. And then when you see a handsome guy, you try to run fast to catch up to see, oh, this guy is handsome. I need to take over to show my capabilities. And then you run high speed, and then until you pass by this guy, and then this guy didn't see you anymore, and then you slow down. This is another high speed running.
So this HMLD is actually the total distance of the high speed running.
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, the presentation today focused on how many uses loss of glycogen, and how many of them actually no need that much of nutritional intervention on carbs loading, post carbohydrate ingestion. Okay, so I have to look at their HMLD and their player load longitudinally. Okay, and there is some more example that will show you. Yeah, and in the Catapault system, this football movement profile is making every support staff life easier, but they need the Catapault user to activate this feature, so that the system can generate the profile of this guy. For example, this guy is, for example, just now we saw Danilo did a lot of high-speed running. So this Danilo profile will be high percentage in dynamic high intensity and dynamic medium intensity, this rate. So they will show the percentage, how many percent you are working on dynamic, medium, dynamic high, and then very low percentage in low intensity and very low intensity. So this profile actually gives the nutritionist the idea, okay, who shall I focusing more in carbs? Who shall I focus less? Who shall I focus more in recovery if we look at long-term data? And because some of the player will show very low intensity and running medium intensity, such as the goalkeeper. So are we going to say that he's not doing his job? No, because this is the goalkeeper profile. Yeah, so these are some thoughts that we can improve to use the Catapault system for the time being.
You mean we don't activate this feature to create the individual profile?
Yes, because this feature has to be activated. It's a new feature.
So we no need to add on any cost, but just only activate it.
Yeah, they are no need. Just they are using the same data. Just that you create another feature. It's just that your phone, you need to create another widget, but still use the information from your phone.
Okay, but the individual profile, what are the parameter looks like? I mean, will be there like just now what you show us, the PL, the HML.
The football movement profile will show you something like this on my screen. Hang on, let me show you this again. Sorry, I didn't share this. Yeah, this is the one. Can you see my screen?
Chris, I remember when I look at the Selangor FC heart rate monitor data, right? I remember that's the reason why I feel strange and awkward. That's why I'm thinking about I want to discuss with you for this. I remember I saw the data from the Selangor FC few years back is that they have a by zone data. Means that they go first zone until fifth zone. So the player usually their intensity play in different which zone, So is that is referring to what you meant just now about the intensity also?
No. What I am saying today is all mechanical loading.
Okay.
And all the external loading. And the reason why I do this is the Penang FC actually not wearing any heart rate.
Not any what?
Not wearing any heart rate monitors during match. They only wear the Catapault system without the heart rate strap.
But it's in one system or they don't have that? Sorry, I don't know.
I'm not sure because the latest one, the heart rate system is actually embedded without us realizing. The previous version, they actually need to wear the Polar H9 and other strap in the chest. So you got two devices at the body. So I think they feel let's to. I'm not sure whether they have or not.
But when they purchase a system, it's actually full set or they can buy separately.
They can buy separately.
Oh, okay.
They can buy separately. Yeah, and I understand that the heart rate data will make the nutritionist work easier because if they spend long time in zone 4, zone 5, you know what to give. Yeah, but I'm not sure why Penang FC is not doing that. Is it because of not comfortable or I actually also prefer if they wear heart rate.
From what we asked the data analyst for a few times, he say need to pass on another thing, but he told us he can try, but I don't think he has tried yet.
So that means that they have heart rate monitor.
I believe they have.
Manpower and also the budget is always the issue for Penang FC. And I doubt also they understand the importance of how to make use of the devices properly. That's also another big issue.
Correct. Because when I look at the forward data, right, which is a very important position, if we can compare our local speed and the foreign athlete speed, then we can slowly improve our substitute in future. For example, Bruno is running 40 meter in, let's say, 3 to 4 seconds. Our athletes can do that? We don't know. So these are all these data will be given in the Catapault system. If the SNC use this data to improve their training, because the forward sprinting, it will be definitely different from the central midfielder sprinting. That's why the positional data for each group has to be separated. To use it in their training.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good insight. Very insightful.
Just want to ask Chris about this one that you say we can activate the individual player profile.
Football
profile in the Catapault system, the open field.
Yes.
I actually have the access for my account. Do you mind if I share? Then do you know how to activate it? Or I'm not sure if my account.
You have to communicate with the Catapault technician. The
supplier, the vendor.
The China guy.
So they will help us to activate.
They will guide you to activate that.
Singing, later you will become their analyst for Super League team, not nutritionist. But anyway, that's a very good info that we can share with the team so that depends on them. Okay.
Yeah, because I think you all use a lot of time working on this summary master sheet, but all this can be generated easily from their paid feature. Sorry, you didn't see my screen, right?
No.
That's because we are not familiar with with these toys. This is not our toys, right?
Yeah.
And when we try to extract, we can only use 10 parameters, like extract 10 at a time. So
use the main one that relevant to the nutritionist first.
Yeah, because we don't know what does all these parameters mean also initially.
So she just extract whatever things she think is important.
Yeah, and when you test in red color weight loss, possible implication on sport performance, you also have to take into consideration. Just want to share because our athletes, national athletes, right, got no problem with weigh in, weigh out weight because they will ingest a lot during training. But the problem arises when they come in, they are dehydrated because of their habit. So they will show the coaches and the support staff, they drink when we are seeing face to face. But after they go out from the training center, not seeing you, they actually didn't drink that frequent. That's why when they come in, they will come in dehydrated. When we come in dehydrated, no matter how you ingest during your match, during your competition, you will still end up dehydrated after that. Yeah, I'm not sure whether you agree with me.
We agree with most of the athletes come in before training are dehydrated.
Yeah, that's why this is another habit that cannot do anything but educate.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's all today. Yeah. Any other questions?
Any suggestion from you as a summary to them so that they can they know to use this device?
Using this device, right? If you use alone and shock injury, right, you won't go anywhere. But if you share this to the coaches, present this to the coaches and the SNC, if this SNC guy is interested, but we need feedback on what coach wants. But sometimes the coach will say, oh, I didn't expect this guy to run this slow, or this is not supposed to be his load. Oh, this guy is working so hard. It's too much. No wonder he always gets injured. Yeah, that's the graph that we can see very close to the high load, mean and standard deviation line, right? There's one guy, Danny Low, very close, back-to-back match. Why this is only two guys who work at this load, but not the other? So they have to talk to the coaches to have some feedback and discussion on how do we see more in this system. If not, we will only stick to this only.
Chris, just now you show the graph mainly for PL, correct?
Yes.
And it is regardless time.
Regardless time.
So if let's say regardless time, can I expect the substitute who also play, not the 11, in the mean as well? In the mean?
It will pull down the mean, right? That's why I didn't include at the moment.
Pull down the mean means what?
This if I include the substitute, right? The substitute play very short while when compared to the first 11. The gap is too high.
Yeah, because usually just change the player after 70 minutes, right, Singing?
Yeah.
Their strategy.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. That's why the loading is not that high compared to the first 11. But but in the end of the day, at the end of the day, still, what question you want to answer? Yeah, the question to this presentation today is, what are the player load for this 7 Super League match exerted sorry, let me restructure my words. What are the player load and player load looks like for the first 11 athletes? In Super League match. Yeah, this is my question now. This is my question. So that I can plot this graph. But if your question is, what is the player load for across Super League match in Penang FC in Malaysia? Then we have to include the substitute.
Okay.
Right. There are also some questions by Singing. Just that.
I think mostly you have answered by your graph.
Yeah.
Like one of the question was, is there like a benchmark of the values? And then you said you also did answer it in the beginning. But
Okay.
I'm just curious that will the Catapault data be highly affected by their gameplay in each of the matches? Like if they try to play more of a defense or attacking style?
Definitely. That's why if you can see my screen right now.
Yeah.
That's why you have to put this in to understand further.
Okay.
Which state are they playing against, and then what's the outcome? Are they really want this outcome, and which player contribute more to this outcome?
Okay.
Which player contribute less to this outcome, and then they have to review whether why this guy is covering only 7,000, why this guy is covering 11,000. But if we look at the high metabolic loading, Ahmad is giving us 1,500 meters and Adib is giving us 1,000 meters. Is that a problem? You have to communicate with coach after you present.
And also because of this, so that's why we cannot compare is there an improved efficiency from their first match until the recent one, right? Because each match, the style, the gameplay is different.
Correct. That's why I have to verify with coaches.
Okay.
I didn't see much of the gap between
matches
and then between players in each match. But some of the state will show, most probably because they are getting paid less.
Penang FC don't have the late salary issue.
Yeah, yeah. That's why they show the loading is very, very close. Okay. So any other questions?
Do you have past years the past year's data? Do you have any team sports data that with the heart rate so that we know how to use this data? I mean because this one is only Catapault, they don't wear the heart rate monitor. So you just only able to analysis and also present according to whatever information that you have. So do you have a good example to show us? Usually you will have this kind of data. Usually this is how we analyze the data.
Recently.
No, me recently.
I'm recalling because team sport, except hockey, is in our program, but hockey no longer wear heart rate monitors during the match. They only wear Catapault system. They only use GPS data.
This is the current trend or what?
Current trend.
It's a good trend or not a good trend?
I'm not sure because in English league they uses a lot of heart rate data. But in Malaysia league, they don't appreciate heart rate much because they knows that this heart rate data didn't explain to them much.
Or is it because we don't know how to use the data?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but if you want individual sport data, then there will be more examples.
Interpretation wise will be a lot different or no?
Different. Because for example,
can we take short time of your 5 minutes to maybe you can have individual data so we can see?
But not from Catapault, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
Let me see if I still have karate data.
Can you check they have Penang FC got the heart rate monitor or not? Or just only Catapault?
Okay, but last time I asked the analyst, he said got. So.
Okay, let me show you one of the match for one of the karate competition. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
What can you see here? This is a match of karate committee that should last for 3 minutes only. But because of lots of takedown, breaking, so they uses the total time of 5 minutes to finish the match. And the heart rate data will only show you how many time you spend in this zone, how many time you spend in that zone. Okay, and this one actually correlate with the running speed also, because this heart rate data, this maximum heart rate data, we derive from the maximum test in the lab. So they run a VO2 max test, and then during competition, we actually input the heart rate max in the system. So when they fight, so all these are percentage from their maximum heart rate measured in the lab. So when they are doing their training, running, their heart rate span also very similar to this. I'll show you some of the training data.
So when you see the data like this, which is the similar to training and also competition from your expertise, right? How you help them to improve to another level, because it's almost reached to above 90% of the heart rate maximum.
That's why I have to show you this. If not, people will say,
you're just doing testing.
No, people will say, I'm just bluffing.
Who? Dr. Tong, we won't do that.
No. People won't expect people to run repeatedly at high intensity for 8 times, 6 times. For those who didn't experience that, who changed my password? Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just wondering, after we look through the presentation, I don't think we also able to make conclusion that most of the first 11, they do very good job or not, right?
I can see the consistency of 3 to 4 guys, right?
The import player and also another 2 that just now you highlighted.
Ahmad, Irfan?
Yeah, Irfan and another guy, right?
Another one would be Stefano, also quite consistent. Very consistent across the match.
I think they are quite.
Amirul Hisham and also Amirul Hisham. Yeah, the 2 forward. Danilo, Dylan, OJ, 1 Jack Haikal.
The the one that I remember is Adib.
Adib, yeah, Adib also.
Because injury, is it singing or not?
He does have injury, but I'm not sure if that particular match.
Okay.
I'll show you this.
But from what I last time sembang with their analysts, they say the Catapault data also how to say, because it all depends on the field, the condition, the situation on the field, whether like the ball is on their side. if let's say throughout the match, the ball is not really at their kind of area, then it also will affect their data, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So would it be possible that maybe the IDIP's data is not meeting the average or the mean is because that kind of situation? Because I think based on our observation, Hui Mei, during the matches, IDIP's performance is okay. Not like that below the average.
Medium lah, medium. It's
That's why I
not
always need
low.
to refer back to the coach.
Correct.
Mm.
Correct.
So we need to suggest the analyst to do the template that you show us, like the field and then with the position and then their HMLD.
He will hate you.
That's why now if we know there's a better way, we also don't know how to tell him.
Well, it's okay. I know
Then let
what
me
to do.
share. Share with I shall share my whole.
Chris, this one will take you a lot of time for the analysis part.
For what?
I mean, your analysis take long time.
Oh no lah. Just use pivot. How do I share my screen? Document advanced.
You see, we got student in USS. What? See USS. Who are the students who are interested to work in Penang FC? You know, we can attach them there and see how much they can contribute. See their interests. We show guidelines. If let's say they want to get job there, then of course that is the opportunity, right?
Correct. Okay. So this I can only find the latest one. Is this guy Shafiq? No, this is Arif. Arif is currently injured, but because I'm going to push him later to this red zone. So for the time being, I can only put him on cycling at 80% zone, 80 to 90%. So before we do this, we have to understand how some of the demand of the match or position works. Karate is very straightforward. 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes at zone 5, 90 to 100%. So when very close to pre-competition and competition, we will do the simulation of the heart rate to work closely to the match intensity. So this is the 5 sets of the karate community specific metabolic training. Or in general term, we call it high intensity interval training. Okay, and then we slowly work on that because he's undergo rehab at the moment. So the lower limb and upper limb is not ready for me to push at 90 to 100%. Yeah, and football will work very similar to this, where we got the heart rate data, we got the speed data. Actually, the SNC can work on this. You know the match. Okay, this guy can run 20 km per hour. Okay, so during training, without interference from the opponent, you should be run higher, right? So it's 110, 120% of their match sprinting time. So if this guy, there are some long conditioning day, you have to spend more time in zone 3, zone 4, or spend spend more time in zone 2, but you need longer. So the training is still back to what the SNC wants, and when and how. So for karate, he's injured, but he has to meet the red zone to prepare him to the C competition. But at the moment, he is not ready yet. So but we have to provide the foundation before he returns to play. That's why we have to include this kind of training, which mimic the loading, but not the intensity, to improve this guy further. I hope this answers your question.
Thanks, Chris. This is a very good example.
And people always ask me why karate need to run so many 800 meters. The consequences will be, if you lose a round and the opponent is going to the final, you need to fight the repeat charge another 5 rounds. So it's a total of 8 rounds also. That's why 8 rounds of 3 minutes. So you have to get ready for the worst situation.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Chris. Any questions? If no question, thank you very much, Chris, for your time. And please remember to bill us. And Singing, if let's say are you confident to bring this report to C head coach?
But I'm not sure if I can do so. If not, like override the data analyst. Maybe we can discuss later.
You just discuss